Seville, Spain, September 24th, 1559. The Plaza de San Francisco is overflowing. Thousands from across the region have gathered over the past 3 days to witness a grim spectacle, an auto da fe. In the heart of the square, two towering wooden platforms have been constructed. On one side, inquisitors, clergy, and officials are seated in solemn ranks. On the other, the condemned stand in silence. Men and women charged with the most severe offense in 16th century Spain, heresy. Among them is a woman only 26 years, daughter to one of Seville's most prestigious families. Her name is Maria Deborah. Her crime, reading the Bible in Castilian and embracing Martin Luther's ideas. While the others show fear, Maria's face remains calm. In her eyes, there is no dread, only the firm resolve of one prepared to die for her faith. Before the tribunal of the Holy Office, Maria Deborah had defended her beliefs with such clarity and theological depth that even seasoned inquisitors were momentarily at a loss. Attempts to convince her to recant were in vain. Torture failed. Promises of mercy failed. She remained unwavering until the end, becoming not only a martyr, but a symbol of defiance against the imposed conformity of the Inquisition. How did a young noblewoman from Seville's elite arrive at such a fate? What gave her the courage to defy the most powerful institutions of her age, knowing it would almost certainly lead to her death? To grasp the depth of this moral and intellectual bravery, we must return to the origins of her short, extraordinary life. Maria was born around 1533 in Seville, the illegitimate child of juror Pedro Garcia de Hiro Borquez, a member of the minor nobility. She grew up in privilege, enjoying a remarkable education rare for women of her time. Early on, she showed extraordinary intellect and an endless hunger for knowledge. Unlike other girls who were taught domestic duties and basic piety, Maria was given a full classical education. Her bright mind mastered Latin, picked up Greek, and most importantly, delved deeply into the original scriptures. Eyewitness accounts describe a young woman who could recite large parts of the New Testament by memory, especially those passages that dealt with contentious subjects like justification by faith, good works, the sacraments, and the true church's nature. In the early 1500s, Seville had a thriving intellectual atmosphere. At the peak of its economic success due to American trade, the city buzzed with new ideas, even under rising inquisitorial pressure. Here, Maria encountered the reformist currents sweeping Europe. Reformation doctrines entered Spain through merchants, diplomats, and students returning from abroad. Smuggled books arrived concealed in wine barrels and double-bottomed chests. One muleteer, Julio Hernandez, became notorious for bringing Protestant literature into Seville from Burgundy. But Maria's intellectual turning point came through the sermons of Dr. Juan Gil, called Egidio, and Casiodoro de Reina, a monk from San Isidoro del Campo. Though veiled in orthodox language to avoid persecution, their sermons spread Lutheran principles. Salvation through faith alone, scriptural supremacy, and the rejection of certain church doctrines. Maria's eager intellect absorbed these ideas. What moved her most was the belief that every Christian had the right to read the Bible in their native tongue without clergy intervention. This notion struck at a core tenet of Catholic power, control over Scripture's interpretation. The home of Isabel de Bana, another noblewoman, soon became a refuge for Protestant sympathizers. There, small gatherings read and debated sacred texts, clearly violating church law. Maria became a central figure in these meetings, recognized for her theological insight and persuasive speech. What began as academic interest turned into deep conviction. Maria did not simply accept Protestantism. She embodied it. Whether she knew it or not, she had crossed a line that the Spain of Philip II would not tolerate. The political climate was hostile to dissent. Spain had appointed itself guardian of Catholicism, battling Protestantism across Europe. The king, ruler of vast territories, viewed religious unity as essential. The Inquisition, founded in 1478, served as a tool to maintain this orthodoxy. By the 1550s, its reach in Seville expanded, spurred by suspicions of Lutheran gatherings. investigators zeroed in on San Isidoro del Campo as a hotbed of reformist thought. In 1557, some monks, including Cassiodoro de Reina, escaped to Geneva. Others were captured. By 1558, the Inquisition had gathered enough intelligence to launch mass arrests. Isabel de Baina's house was raided and demolished. Every document and book inside was seized. Maria Deborah, then 25, was arrested shortly afterward for Lutheran heresy. What followed was a trial that revealed her astounding resolve. The inquisitorial process was brutal. Accused were isolated, kept unaware of their charges or accusers. Confessions were solicited under threat of harsher punishment. If incomplete or absent, torture was permitted. At first, Maria claimed her faith was entirely Catholic and not deserving of punishment. Confronted with witness testimony, she conceded some parts but rejected others. This was not enough. What most astonished the tribunal, however, was her ability to debate. She presented her arguments so skillfully, even in front of trained theologians, that many were left speechless. An inquisitorial clerk wrote that Maria demonstrated a passionate and deeply reasoned command of theology. This ability marked her not as a passive heretic, but an active proselytizer, someone far more dangerous in the eyes of the Church. While imprisoned, Maria received multiple visits from friars tasked with convincing her to renounce her beliefs. As her execution date neared, these efforts increased. All failed. The inquisitors themselves admitted they had been unable to secure her retraction, despite extreme measures. On September 24, 1559, Maria de Bourquez was led, along with others, to the auto da fe at Plaza de San Francisco. It was a grand spectacle designed to punish and terrify. Its purpose was clear. This would be the fate of anyone who defied religious orthodoxy. The accused wore the San Benito, a yellow robe marked with red crosses, branding them heretics. They were made to sit through long sermons condemning their sins. Sentences followed. Repentant heretics faced lesser punishments, from public penance to life imprisonment. For the unrepentant, the pertinacious, there was only one verdict: hand over to secular authorities, which meant death by fire. Maria Deborah was branded a heretic and pertinacious dogmatizer. Her punishment, execution by fire. Even then, she was offered a final chance to recant and be strangled before burning. She refused. The condemned were then taken to the Prado de San Sebastian, the designated site for executions. Wooden stakes stood surrounded by kindling. Reports say Maria remained composed. As she was tied to the stake, she continued to affirm her faith, encouraging others to hold firm. When the flames began to rise, onlookers claimed she recited scripture. Her final moments, it is said, were spent gazing skyward, murmuring what seemed to be a prayer. Soon, the smoke and fire silenced her voice, the voice that dared challenge the most powerful forces of her world. That day, other women were also executed: Isabel de Baina, Maria Coronel, Maria de Ver, and Francisco Lopez. Isabel's house was not just seized but destroyed entirely, as was often done to homes tainted by heresy. Maria de Bourquez's story might have been lost, like so many victims of intolerance, but her unwavering stance and tragic end gave rise to a legacy. In 1799, Spanish author Luz Gutierrez published a novel titled Cornelia Borgia, Historia Verdadera de la Hija Española, loosely based on Maria's life and that of Maria Coronel. The novel, which denounced inquisitorial abuses, gained immense popularity, was translated into several languages, and helped inspire liberal and anti-clerical movements in the 1800s. The execution of Maria de Bourquez and her fellow reformers effectively crushed Protestantism in Seville. A few survivors escaped abroad and carried on their work. Cassiodoro de Reina, one of her mentors, completed in 1569 the first full translation of the Bible into Castilian, La Biblia del Oso, still read today in Spanish-speaking Protestant circles. Maria Deborah Bourquez's legacy forces us to confront enduring questions: freedom of conscience, access to knowledge, and the price of personal conviction. Her death wasn't only a religious martyrdom, It was an act of intellectual defiance. In a time when we're largely excluded from such discourse, she not only formed beliefs of her own, but defended them with brilliance even her enemies admired. Nearly 500 years later, Seville paid tribute by naming a street after her. A modest gesture for someone who showed that nobility lies not in lineage, but in having the courage to stand by one's beliefs. The woman executed for reading a forbidden book remains a timeless reminder that even in the darkest eras, there have always been those who dared to think for themselves, no matter the cost.